Please welcome Kamilah Prince.
Good morning. So I'm glad to have spent some time getting to know everybody kind of throughout the last few days, or last 2 days, I guess. Time goes fast. And so similar, Lee, I was just saying that I kind of, after talking to some folks here, have kind of made some adjustments to my presentation as well from what we had originally put together. And so I'm going to talk a lot more just about like how we do things and then why we do things. And to kind of get started, as it was kind of kicked off, we are always outspent. Every year, it's, I get reports daily on spending that's happening in states and in districts, and it sort of puts me in panic attack mode some days as you see the numbers and reports coming in. But with that, it makes us have to be more intuitive, think quicker, think more targeted, and really make sure that we're connecting with the people that we need to connect with. And so as you can see here, just in general, our spending overall in the state and New Jersey legislative races, we believe there was a total of about 48 million spent, with 15,000 kind of going into our targeted races. In Virginia, we know it was over about 78 million spent on legislative races. On our targeted races, 78 million spent on our targeted races. This is what we've been able to track thus far. Still kind of digging through all the reports and things as we move forward towards 2022. But for this exercise, I'm actually going to walk you through what we did in one single district in New Jersey, just to kind of give you a feel for how we take and use data. Here, as you can see, we are way outspent overall in New Jersey. TV, radio spending, that's a 9-to-1 spend ratio. Usually, I feel like 2-to-1 is good. Anything over that, I start to have slight panic attacks. But here again, we're learning to just be smarter, be wiser with our spends. And so with this, when you break it down, this is numbers wrong. This is what I was trying to correct this morning. But here in this district alone, we saw about 6.3 million spent overall, not just radio and TV, but total spending in the district. And we spent on the Republican side, about 1.7. So here, the overall ratio was about 3.7 to 1. But this is a district that I'm happy to say that we kept the Senate seat here, and we flipped to House districts. And so as we start to look at the data and just the type of information we use, Data Trust is one of our vendors. And I should start with that everything we do on committee is working with different vendors across the different aspects. So we have buying vendors, we have digital spend vendors, we have data vendors, and we're constantly pulling everything together to make the smartest, best decisions with the information that we have available. Some of the key things that we're looking at here, cell phone reliability. I know everybody hates political calls to your cell phone. I get it. I do too, actually, as I still give them out anyway. But political cell phone calls, we're looking at landline reliability. We start to look at education breakdowns and net worth. People in different boxes tend to vote or trend different ways, and or you're talking to them in different ways. And so those are things that are important to us. Sometimes we use race, not as much, because people are more issue-based, actually, than race. People like, I'm Black, right, and Black people care about education just as much as white people care about education, right? And so it's not as much race that we're looking at versus the issues and where people stand on them. And then population density, always, again, just the type of voter that you're targeting is important. And then age. People in those age brackets are in different points of life. In that 25 or really 35 age bracket, you're having families, you're married, you're doing these things. As you get older, 65 plus, you're seniors, and so the things that are important to you start to change. You may be looking at retirement if you haven't already. You're looking at, healthcare is really big for this subset of voters, and so these are some of the things that we look at, and then male to women, men and women just vote differently. So within this district, we did a modeling project, and a modeling project, I know you guys, I'm sure you know this, but it's really a deep dive survey where we're asking a lot of questions and trying to get a feel for where voters are, what they're standing in, and I think the keyword that I keep saying is voters. We really target people who are registered to vote. We spend not a lot of time trying to talk to people who aren't registered. That's the RNC's job, that's state party job. Our job is really spending time talking to voters. And so within this, within our modeling project, we really break out where people fall. And so like, as you can see, the skip, non-voters, like I just don't have time to try to spend money to talk to somebody to get them to register to vote and then vote our way. That's a 2 to 3 shift that you're trying to make there. Republican voters, I don't spend a lot of time talking to them. They're gonna get hit, so that 1, 2, and 3, I'll spend some time in 3, and I'll tell you why in a second, but a lot of times in those Republican voters, like, they're Republican voters. I don't need you to convince you to be a Republican voter. You're a Republican voter, so why am I gonna spend dollars and time talking to you to vote? I need you to just go vote. That's the only thing I need to tell you to do, is remind you to go vote on election day. It's November, whatever, right? That's my job. The Democrat voters, like a number 4, the strongest Dem, that will take so much money and time to try to convince somebody that why. A lot of people have made their mind up, and so like, we're not gonna target those. But so when you look at 3 and 6, when they're a national Democrat or a national Republican, that's saying that they really care about national issues, and they're voting on party lines on national issues. So if like I start to expand my universe, I'm gonna expand to 6 if I'm talking local, because we're doing state level stuff, not national things. So maybe there's an opportunity there to convince some of those people, but 90% of the time, honestly, I'm not gonna waste money in that box either. So the 7, 8, 9, and 10 are the people that I want to talk to. And these are, so the persuasion universe, so they're people that we've identified that either they have the same interest, or they're upset about something, and so there's an opportunity to talk to them. There's an opportunity to persuade them to be, to vote with us. The high prop persuasion means that high propensity voters. So these are individuals who a lot of times are gonna be what we call soft Rs or soft Ds, Democrats who regularly vote, but they're kind of voting against, different parties. They're maybe pulling Republican primary ballots and Democrat primary ballots on different elections, obviously. Or they're like a true swing or independent voter. But the high propensity voters who I'm gonna spend most of my time on, because I know that they're voting. They're a high propensity voter. I don't know where they are, so I'm gonna spend a lot of time and dollars trying to talk to them. And that whole group as a whole is who we're gonna target. We have the remaining high is they still pretty much turn out, but they may have skipped an election or 2 here or there. Low propensity, a lot of times low propensity are showing back up as like presidential voters or gubernatorial voters. So they're picking one of those election sets to vote in. And so like those 4 categories are the most that we're going to really target and how we're gonna spend our time. Low propensity voters, because they're skipping a lot of elections, that's a bigger risk on my side, right? Because I don't know if they're gonna come out and vote. So I still have a 2-prong approach. I've got to convince them on my issue, but then also convince them that it's important and that they need to go vote this election cycle. So each kind of tier to me is more money spent trying to talk to and persuade a voter. So it's not just enough to know, like, okay, there's a subset of people that I'm gonna talk to, but I still need to know who they are. I need to know the breakup and the makeup of who they are. And so, I'm looking at, again, those same categories as before. I'm looking at the net worth. I'm looking at their education. I'm looking at the male versus female breakup. Males typically will come more aligned with the Republican Party than women sometimes do. I'm looking at just a lot of various components to get an idea of who are these people that I need to talk to, so that as I'm building messages, right, like if I'm building a message towards a more woman audience, I'm going to have women in the ads. I'm going to have children in the ads. I'm going to have things that are going to appeal to women. And so that's why things like this are so important. And then even further, I need to know what's important to these individuals. I don't want to talk to somebody who's, in my persuadable group, and they are, teachers' unions are the most important thing to them, and I'm talking to them about crime. Right? It's never going to connect. I'm never really going to get them to get to that next hurdle and to vote Republican. And so we're constantly looking at what within that group is going to help motivate or swing people to turn our way. So as you can see here, when you look at the persuasion audience, which is the orange group in the middle, if it's kind of hard to see, the number one issue amongst that group was illegal immigration, which was kind of shocking for us to think in New Jersey that illegal immigration would be the number one issue amongst persuadable voters, but it was. And then coming in second was property tax, and third was the unchecked power. So a difference in like the Democrats in D.C. being able to also have power with the Democrats in the state, being the third issue. So we found that very interesting, but as we broke it down a little bit further, because again, I told you, like, my number one target will always be the high prop persuasion voters, because those are the number one. I know that they're voting. I just need to get them to vote with me. Their number one issue was illegal immigration. And then when you look at the number 8 group, was their top issue was the crime and defund the police. So in creativity, we tried to combine the two into one ad. But these are the individuals that we're just going to hammer home. Again, I'm not going to spend time on the top tier. I'm not going to spend time on the second tier, which were the Dems. I'm not going to spend time on the Republicans. I'm only going to focus in on these persuadable voters. And so what do we do with this? So now I know like the most important issues. I know, who it is that I'm talking to. And so how does that relate to what you're interested in? And how does that go into how we do buys? And so we work with buys and vendors across this country to really try to target those voters. And I wanted to show you this because this is the first media buy that we received, and I'm not going to name the vendor, but it was a buy that we received from the vendor. And as you can see here, they threw up some stuff on CNN and MSNBC cable, which if you know about politics, CNN and MSNBC cable aren't really persuadable voters at the end of the day. A lot of those individuals have made up their mind on these networks, and then throwing in some sports. And this isn't a good buy. And if I didn't know what I was doing, I would have been like, okay, vendor, thanks for this. This is great, and made this purchase. But this is an absolutely terrible buy, and it would have been a waste of money on our side. And so, because again, like these are the people that we are trying to target, and these are the people that we're trying to hit, and they're not on MSNBC and cable watching TV. So this is the actual buy that after a couple iterations we got to. And as you can see, it's a lot more detailed. We're focusing in on some of the women voters and trying to persuade, because a lot of our persuasion universe were women voters. We are looking at Hallmark, Food Network, TBS, FX, History Channel, all these places where individuals are actually, that were targeted are going to be. And with this, we also matched a digital buy. And so we went out and we did a digital spend on your typical networks, right? Your Facebooks and Google ads and things like that, but also hit the apps, some of these apps that were matching what this TV buy mirrored. And so how did it work out for us? We were able to beat 2 incumbents, electing 2 Republicans into the seat. As you can see, it's very close, the way New Jersey elections work. You know, you'll have 4 people running, and the top 2 win. So it wasn't trying to get just one across the finish line. We actually had to get both of them across the finish line, and we were successfully able to do that, taking out the 2 incumbents in this. And so overall in New Jersey, like using these tactics, we were able to pick up 7 seats in the state, which is the most in over 30 years. And we also applied that same to Virginia. So I just wanted to quickly show y'all, like Virginia spending here again, we're still being outspent pretty overwhelmingly, at least 2 to 1, but in some districts it was much, much more. And then here, we were also able to pick up 7 seats. We also do lieutenant governor races. But again, like knowing those top 3 issues were key. Crime, education, and the economy were what we talked about. And we hit that persuasion universe in the same exact way, targeting those individuals, continuously hitting them. And then we were successful in Virginia as well. And so with that, I feel like there's more questions than I've probably given, so I'm happy to take questions.
Kamilah, thank you so much. Questions? Anybody want to drill in and ask about some of the details here? Yeah.
Hi, it's me again. I just presented. You know, I am curious, given how fluid the nature of sentiment is, right? I mean, there's a lot of people who have strongly held beliefs, and then there are people who, you know, are kind of like figuring it out every day and kind of reacting to stimulus. So, you know, I guess what kind of frequency do you look at the data so that you can find that balance of being proactive of like, I know I'm not going to turn this Democratic, you know, person, but there might be kind of people that I can just based on how kind of the mood and the environment is working, and how does kind of data support you finding that balance of being proactive, of taking advantage of opportunities, but also, you know, reactive to, you know, be able to kind of stay in touch with what's happening in real time?
Yeah, so that's a great question. Multiple things. So I get daily reports, especially as we get closer to the election. I'm getting daily reports on spend. I'm getting daily reports on who's voted already. Did, you know, like absentee, did their absentee come in, or did they early vote? So kind of on the election side of it, like I'm looking at those reports on a constant basis and changing my turnout, like, and taking people on and off lists, kind of sort of thing. On the like information side of it, it's too, so, you know, both of these modeling projects that we did them in June or July, and absolutely, that's a standing time, point in time, right? And so there is an evolution of voters. What we see a lot of time is that people who are in that swing, kind of, as we say, go home, but they go home to their typical party a lot of times. So either people are going to start to model more Democrat or start to model more Republican as we get closer to the election. People's views truly kind of state which party they're a part of. So we do, outside of modeling projects, we'll do polling projects, and we'll do a couple of those depending on how much money we have. They cost. But we'll do polling projects to still see, like, what is the intensity, because that's what we're measuring, like how fired up are people about something, and then also, like, are those issues and those subsets still the same? It's harder to pivot topics later in the election, but maybe we'll like back up on one or push forward on another.
My question is about measurement. Looking at the media plan that you showed us, how are you measuring your successes, right? I know overall, at the end of the day, the candidate gets voted or not, right? But how are you measuring that immediate impact of that TV buy, Hallmark and all that, versus what you showed MSNBC and stuff like that, right? And you just talked about the issues and what you want to pivot on. So a follow-up would be, what is your flight? How close to the election day are you increasing your frequency on certain issues? And how do you determine which issues you want to push forward on and others that you may not want to at that point in time?
Yeah. So several questions within that. So like if I forget a piece, just remind me. So the first is that one of the things that we know was very successful for us is that we went up early and we were able to define our opponent based on those issues. And so we were putting our opponent to have to explain why they don't fit whatever we were saying, right? And so like that's a true component that played into it when you're looking at like the timeline of things and how we're working through things. But on the measurability side, that's something that we're actually getting better with, and we're actually getting better with being able to make adjustments to even buys as we're going through and like seeing like, although, you know, I learned a lot from everybody here, you know, talking about like impressions versus like click through, right? And so like right now, like the only thing that we've been seeing is impressions and are we meeting our audience? You know, we know a lot about like the 10 seconds that people will watch digital and things like that. And so like on our end, it's more cutting things down to like hit what you guys are seeing, right? So it's like the two for like, I'm trying to constantly, it used to be all ads were 30 ads or 60 seconds. And like, if you didn't do that, then you wouldn't run an ad. And so now we're learning how to be more nimble and kind of get to that 15-second. Don't think I get to 10. That's pretty hard, but I think we can get to 15 and, you know, take off being able to skip. But, you know, and so like we're constantly moving to try to like adapt to what is happening in your world to match the political side. And so I think measurement is one of those that is the most challenging piece. If we're being honest on like the digital, we're getting better at being able to see like of those 6 stations, which one is being more efficient. And so like we've got vendors that we're working with now that help, that are helping to show that piece to us so that we can make adjustments. But a lot of political is, it's sad to say it's like a day-to-day changing evolution. But what we've learned is you can't pick up on the newest, greatest issue. Stick to what you identified in the modeling project as a good, and as long as your polling kind of throughout doesn't show that it moves away from kind of keeping that path.
How are you using OTT and CTV to micro-target? Because linear buys, especially when you're working at your level of district level, it's got to have a lot of waste to it. Mm-hmm. So how are you using the data-driven and the digital OTT and CTV platforms to micro-target more effectively? How much of the buy was going in there?
Yeah, so we've shifted. So like I'm actually doing a session sometime next week on, you know, like I wouldn't say done doing broadcast buys, but like broadcast to me is just you might as well light money on fire. I think in some areas it works, you know, like in more rural areas or where there's not as many options, broadcast can be effective. So this is not an attack on broadcast. It's just, yeah. It's not that, you know, attack on broadcast, but there's just more effective and efficient ways. And I heard, I think somebody yesterday was talking about addressable and using addressable. And so that is something that we are definitely doing, you know, with these modeling projects. Like I've identified specific people that we need to talk to and target, right? And so like now that you can send direct to device is even better. Now you can send direct to their cable box is even better. And so we're shifting. The industry is shifting, and especially on Republicans, we did more. I will tell you, the broadcast buy costs more, but I did more on connected and digital spends. So I would probably say, I'm going to say this district, I would say about 30% went to connected in this district.
And were you doing it, how are you optimizing, especially as you're using the social channels? I mean, sort of famously, in fact, on this very stage, 5 years ago, Garrett Lansing, who ran Trump's media buying in 2016, told us about exactly how they were using they were throwing hundreds of thousands of creatives through automation, through Facebook, to identify and to A/B test everybody and everything on every message, to rapid fire massive amounts of spend every day into Facebook. I imagine you had neither the money or the capability to do that.
Yeah, absolutely.
But what kind of what kind of optimizations were you doing along the way? What kind of feedback loop were you getting from the social channels to change and swap in different messaging?
Yeah, so as much messaging, we didn't change a whole lot. Again, like, our thing was kind of like, what do they say, like, it's like Novocaine, like keep pushing, that same narrative. So we didn't change messaging as much, but we did do a lot of shifting based on where people were actually seeing our ads, and then how much within that persuasion universe did we still have to target, or were we getting more repeats seeing the same ads, and so did we need to switch to other platforms to try to reach, to again, kind of expand that, broaden the reach to make sure that we are reaching that whole group that we are trying to target. And so that's more of the adjustments that we make versus messaging. It's more on the, like, are we in the right places? Are these platforms performing in the right way to be able to ensure that we're reaching as much as that persuasion audience as we can? And so that's really how we shift and focus. If there were something, I'll use Virginia as an example. I'm sure a lot of you heard about the Glenn Youngkin campaign, and there were the issues happening around education and the critical race theory. And so everyone's like, oh, did you switch all your talking to education, and did you only talk about education? No. We actually did not pivot because although that was a big issue in a certain area, like, our education message was one of the top 3 issues we defined back in June. However, we didn't pivot because we knew that crime in some of these districts was more important. We knew that the economy and the cost of living was more important. And if we would have switched our messaging to just education, we would have lost voters. And so we didn't do a whole lot of changing a message versus changing platforms and strategies and networks to make sure that we're hitting and maximizing that persuasion audience.
I think that was one of the biggest messages that came through in the January event that we did from the Republican side, especially the Youngkin campaign, was that if we had listened to the pundits telling us how to do our media buys, we would have lost this hands down.
And it's true. It's true. You can't go. I mean, again, it goes back to the original buy was like, throw everything on MSNBC and CNN. But we know people watching MSNBC and CNN are likely in those top 6 boxes of strong Republicans or strong Democrats. Like, I'm a big CNN watcher. So it's like, those are people who are already plugged in politically. Like, usually that persuasion audience are people who are working every day and don't have time to be, like, watching CNN and MSNBC and, like, plugged in as politically. And so, like, we needed to reach everyday people, everyday voters who are taking their kids to soccer practice or are going, and working 2 jobs, and so they don't have the time to pay attention to those outlets. And so, but when they come home, they like to watch a good show on Fox or FX, and so, like, those are the people that we are targeting, and that's how we make our adjustments and why we do our buys the way we do.
Kamilah, thank you. I think everybody will have more questions for you for the rest of the day and in the roundtables. Thank you so much. This is really cool.
Thank you, guys.